Anyone but her sister whispered. The Duke didn't look away. Lila froze as the room fell silent. Every whisper died, every eye widened. Then he stepped forward and said, "Bring her here." The chandelier trembled with the weight of 1,000 crystals, scattering light across the polished marble floor. Lila stood at the edge of the ballroom, her hands clutching the hem of her faded green dress, the one her mother insisted was suitable enough. She could feel the stares, 100 sharp eyes slicing through her like cold knives. Her stomach twisted. She wanted to shrink, melt into the shadows, but the polished floor offered no escape. "Anyone but her," her eldest sister hissed, voice sharp as the silver knives glinting on the dining tables. "The Duke deserves—" She faltered, as though the words themselves had betrayed her. Behind her, their parents' faces pinched in disapproval, eyes flicking with silent judgment. Lila's cheeks burned. Her father's jaw tightened, a warning unspoken, and she pressed her palms to her thighs, nails biting into the fabric of her dress. The Duke stepped into view, and the chatter in the room faltered. He was tall, impeccable in dark velvet, the light catching the sharp angles of his jaw. But it wasn't his height, or the medals on his chest, or the way his hair caught the chandelier light. It was his stare. It found her. Not the neat, perfect daughters her family had paraded forward. Not the smiles and bows and rehearsed grace. Him. Only her. Every whisper died. Even the string quartet seemed to falter, the bow of the first violin trembling in mid-air. Lila's chest hitched, the running symbol of her life, the worn locket tucked beneath her dress, her mother's gift when she was 12, engraved with words she'd never dared read aloud, was suddenly warm against her skin. A small comfort, but it reminded her she existed, and someone, somehow, had noticed. Her sister stepped closer, voice a dangerous hiss. "He's joking. Surely he doesn't mean—" Her words fell into the sudden, heavy silence. Even the servants paused, trays balanced like fragile lives in their hands. The Duke's eyes didn't waver. And then, for the first time, Lila felt the thrum of a power she'd never known she possessed. A silent challenge in the gaze that refused to look away. A sharp gasp from the corner. Her mother's hand fluttered to her throat. Lila's heart pounded, each beat a drum of dread and disbelief. The Duke took a single step forward, the echo of his boot on marble magnified in the stunned hush. And then, just as she dared a trembling breath, he spoke, soft, deliberate, impossible to ignore. "Bring her forward." The room seemed to tilt. Her sisters' faces paled, mouths opening and closing like fish out of water. Her father's hand clenched into a fist at his side, and Lila froze, every instinct screaming to turn, to run, to disappear into the walls. But the weight of all those eyes pinned her in place. As she stepped forward, the locket pressed hard against her chest, a quiet pulse of courage. She realized the truth she hadn't dared whisper even to herself. They didn't choose me, but he did. And in that frozen ballroom, under the glittering chandeliers and the sharp, shocked gasps, Lila understood. This night would not end quietly. The Duke's gaze lingered, unblinking, and then, just as she reached the center of the room, he leaned slightly, voice carrying only to her, a whisper meant for her alone. "Let's see who you really are." Every eye in the room turned, every breath held, and Lila's chest tightened. Something had shifted, something had begun. And the room waited. The Duke's voice still echoed in Lila's ears, soft but commanding. "Let's see who you really are." She shivered beneath the weight of it. In the corridors behind the ballroom, Her family's polished laughter and murmured praise for her sisters clung to the walls like cobwebs. Lila hugged her arms to her chest, imagining she could shrink into the tapestry-lined walls, into the shadows her family so often left her to inhabit. Her mother appeared, silk dress rustling, perfume sharp and precise. "Lila," she said, voice careful, controlled. "Why can't you try harder? They are watching." Her mother's eyes darted to the corridor window, where the city lights sparkled like jewels. Lila's sisters had smiles, poise, elegance, all that seemed to slip through her fingers. And yet, when she dared glance at them, she noticed something odd. Their smiles trembled ever so slightly when the Duke looked toward her. The family fortune was thin, whispers of failing estates hidden beneath the glittering surface. Lila knew what happened if they failed. Reputation ruined, marriage prospects dwindling. Her sisters were groomed for advantage, polished and adored. She had nothing but small, unnoticed skills, the quiet persistence to survive. That locket under her dress, a gift from her mother she had never worn openly, had been her only constant since childhood. A secret warmth against her chest, a reminder that something private, hers alone, had survived her family's neglect. Her father sat in the study, hands curled around a crystal glass of amber liquid, jaw set tight. "Lila," he said, not looking up, voice flat. "Do not embarrass us again. You have sisters. One of them will do." His words hit like a stone thrown into a pond. Lila's stomach knotted. She remembered a dozen smaller humiliations, tripping over the hem of her gown at a banquet, her ideas dismissed in family meetings, a birthday cake eaten by everyone but her. Every slight stacked up, invisible bricks forming a wall around her. Yet there was a spark, fragile and trembling, that refused to die. That spark glimmered when the Duke had looked at her in the ballroom. Why her? Why now? Lila couldn't explain it, but the question hummed in her mind like an unplayed piano. She pulled her hair back, smoothing it with trembling fingers, and imagined walking back into the ballroom, meeting his gaze again. Something was waiting there, something her family could not see. And maybe she could finally see it herself. Breakfast in the main hall was a careful performance. Gold-rimmed plates, silver spoons polished to a mirror finish, and her sisters seated like queens in training. Lila hovered near the doorway, watching her mother praise Clarice, her eldest sister, for a clever remark about a visiting ambassador. Then came Elise, second sister, laughing at a joke her father hadn't even made. Lila's own voice, if she tried to speak, would falter, drowned beneath the orchestrated approval of the family. She had learned early that silence was her armor. To speak out was to invite sharp rebukes, raised eyebrows, whispered warnings. Yet silence carried its own punishment, the feeling of being unseen, unworthy, expendable. Her internal world had become a collection of tiny rebellions, stealing moments in the garden, lingering near the library's dusty shelves, sketching figures nobody asked for. Every page turned in those stolen hours became a secret testament that she existed. Still, quietly, stubbornly. The household staff whispered rumors, some cruel, some strange. "Miss Lila's peculiar, isn't she?" one maid said under her breath, eyes darting. Peculiar. That word had clung to her like a shadow since childhood. Something in her, something the family didn't understand, made them wary. Yet the Duke had noticed it, hadn't he? Had he seen beyond the peculiar, the unpolished, the disgrace? The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. A small mystery lingered like a wisp of smoke. Why had her mother given her the locket, the tiny, worn piece of silver, engraved with words Lila could barely read? "Even in shadow, you shine." Something in that phrase had always felt like a promise or a warning. Lila touched it now under her blouse, feeling its reassuring weight, wondering if tonight it would matter. By afternoon, the city's noise had softened to distant murmurs. Lila found herself near the drawing room's long windows, sunlight painting gold across the polished floors. Her sisters rehearsed smiles, bows and laughter in the mirrored reflection, but Lila's eyes were fixed elsewhere, on the Duke's shadow as it had crossed the ballroom earlier. He had not moved casually, he had moved deliberately, as though noticing a detail nobody else could see. A small, unnoticed act of hers, a hand straightening a crooked painting, a book left on a table, suddenly felt like a signpost pointing toward him. The contrast between her invisible world and the Duke's sudden attention was dizzying. She had spent years walking the halls unnoticed, now feeling the weight of his gaze like sunlight warming her cold skin. The tension in her family's house was a living thing. Her mother fussed over her hair, her father's eyes remained sharp and critical, yet the Duke's look had unsettled everything. And there it was, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Why her? Why tonight? Something unseen, something silent had begun to stir. The locket throbbed against her chest, a whisper of courage, a promise of change, a secret not yet revealed. Lila took a slow breath, feeling the balance of fear and hope shift. Something significant was coming, and she didn't know if she was ready or if anyone else could stop it. And somewhere, in a corner of the drawing room she hadn't noticed, a shadow moved. Not human, not quite. Something watching, waiting. The Duke appeared at the top of the grand staircase, backlit by the fading sunlight. Lila froze mid-step, the hem of her dress brushing the cold marble. He didn't speak. He simply watched. Every whispered conversation, every laugh from her sisters, every reprimand from her parents seemed to vanish under his gaze. "Why do you hide here?" His voice was quiet but firm, carrying a weight that made Lila's pulse spike. She hadn't even realized she'd been lingering near the library, tucked behind tall shelves. I'm not." Her words stumbled, broken by the memory of her family's disapproval, the countless times she had been told to be invisible. "You're always here," he said, tilting his head. "Quiet, observant, unnoticed. But I saw you. I see you." A twist, a revelation she hadn't dared hope for, pierced her chest. Someone, the one person who wielded influence she could never imagine, truly noticed her. But even as her heart swelled, a shadow flickered behind the Duke's eyes. Calculation, intent, a hidden motive she couldn't yet decipher. The quiet tension shattered when her sister Clarice appeared, voice sharp. "Lila, the Duke shouldn't—" But he ignored her, and the room's energy shifted, charged, unstable. Lila felt a thrill she had never known, a dangerous excitement that whispered, this could change everything, or ruin everything. The ballroom was empty now, the guests long, gone, but the echoes of the evening still clung to the walls. Lila's mother found her there, hands trembling slightly, lips pressed tight. "Do you understand what you've done? Do you know what this could mean?" I don't know." Her voice was barely audible, swallowed by the immense room. "You've made yourself visible," her mother said, eyes dark with fear. "And not in the way we intended." It was a twist that left her dizzy. Her mother's fear, deep, panicked, was sharper than any anger she had faced. Lila realized something her family had hidden for years. Power in this house was not just about wealth or position. Something secretive, something they'd been trying to control, was shifting because of her. In the quiet corner of the room, the locket pressed against her chest. A warmth, a reminder. She fingered it, thinking of its engraving. Even in shadow, you shine. Lila had felt unseen her entire life, but now she was beginning to understand what that phrase might truly mean. Then a knock on the door. She turned, heart hammering. A servant, pale and wide-eyed, whispered, "Mistress, someone is asking to see you, alone." The Duke waited in the moonlit garden, a figure carved from darkness and light. Lila's steps faltered on the cold stone path. She had expected a polite inquiry, perhaps a passing curiosity, but not this. "Why do they fear you?" he asked suddenly, eyes fixed on her. "What do you mean?" Lila whispered, gripping the locket. "Your family," he said, voice low, dangerous. "They act as if you're a threat, and yet they don't even know why." Twist. The Duke revealed a secret she hadn't imagined. He had investigated her family's dealings, their silent manipulations, their power games. Lila had been underestimated, discarded, ignored, but not by him. He had seen everything, understood the hidden cracks, the lies behind the smiles, the whispered plans. A quiet moment followed. The wind stirred the garden, rustling leaves, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers. Lila's pulse slowed. She realized that for the first time, someone outside her family believed she had worth beyond their approval. Then, suddenly, footsteps. Her sister Elise appeared, breathless, eyes wide. "Lila, you can't be here. You don't understand." But the Duke's sharp glance froze her in place. Energy shifted, soft, explosive, tense. Secrets, power, and danger swirled in the cool night air. The next evening, the Duke called the family together in the great hall. Candles flickered, throwing shadows across the faces of women in silk and men in fine coats. Lila's heart thudded like a drum. "Tonight," the Duke said, voice steady, echoing against the stone walls, "we will see who is truly worthy." A twist. He ignored her sisters entirely, letting their smiles falter. Every practiced movement, every rehearsed bow, they meant nothing. His eyes found Lila's, steady and deliberate. "You," he said, pointing directly at her. Silence fell, heavy as lead. "Step forward." Her sisters gasped. Her mother paled. Her father's hand twitched at his side. Every carefully maintained hierarchy, every whispered plan her family had trusted, crumbled under that single sentence. Quiet, explosive, surreal. The room tilted under the weight of their disbelief. Lila's pulse surged. The locket warmed against her chest. A private beacon. The Duke's gaze held hers, unwavering, as if he could see the life she had endured, the silent courage she had carried, the invisible strength she had built. And as she stepped into the center of the hall, the first flicker of triumph touched her chest. But somewhere, in the shadows of the chandelier-lit room, something moved, unseen, watching. Another complication, another hidden intention, waiting to reveal itself. Lila had been chosen, but what she was chosen for, she did not yet understand. The great hall was silent, except for the soft flicker of candlelight. Shadows stretched across the faces of the family who had never truly seen her. Lila stood at the center, the locket pressing warm against her chest. Every heartbeat rang like a drum, loud enough to drown out the whispers of the silk-draped women and polished men around her. "Why her?" her mother finally demanded, voice shaking, brittle with fear and anger. She's nothing. Anyone but her would have..." "Would have done what?" the Duke interrupted, voice slicing through the room like a blade. "Do you even know who she is? Or have you spent so long training yourself to see only what you want, that you cannot recognize what stands before you. The family froze. Lila's sisters paled, mouths opening and closing like trapped fish. Her father's jaw clenched. Every carefully cultivated lie, every whispered plot to advance the favored daughters, hung exposed in the candlelight. The Duke stepped closer, voice low, deliberate. Lila is the one who has quietly held this house together while you chased appearances. The one who noticed the cracks you refused to see. The one who survived when you would have discarded her. And she did it without demanding praise, without showing off, without begging for approval. A gasp rippled through the room. Lila felt a surge of power she had never known, the invisible chains of years snapping in an instant. The locket against her chest seemed to pulse, echoing the heartbeat of her courage. She lifted her chin, meeting every stunned gaze. I exist, she thought. I always have. Her mother's voice trembled. But You ignored her, the Duke said sharply. You groomed others, humiliated her, whispered anyone but her, and yet here she stands. Not broken, not afraid, stronger than you ever imagined. Lila finally spoke, voice steady, carrying the quiet fire she had carried for years. I was invisible to you. I was nothing. But I am done being nothing. I choose me. The hall seemed to exhale. Every whisper of silk, every glint of polished shoe, every sharp glance held its breath. The family's power had always been in perception, in control, but perception could shift. Control could break. And in that moment, Lila held both, clarity and courage. The Duke extended his hand, not as a rescuer, not as a master of judgment, but as someone who had seen the truth all along. Then show me, he said, who you really are. And as she stepped forward, her locket shining faintly beneath her dress, a final revelation struck her. The power she had feared would destroy her was the power she had carried all along. But in the corner of the room, unseen until now, a figure watched, cloaked in shadow. A reminder, triumph had its cost, and the next twist was still waiting. Lila has chosen herself. Her family faces the consequences, and her life is about to transform. But the iron shadow lurking hints at one final revelation. The dawn spilled gold across the balcony, brushing the hall in a soft warmth that made the marble glow like fire. Lila stood at the center, chest still pounding from the confrontation of last night, the locket gleaming faintly beneath her blouse. Its weight no longer felt like a secret. It felt like a crown, a reminder of every small, unseen act that had brought her here. Her family sat in silence, faces pale, eyes wide with a mixture of shame and disbelief. Her sister's smiles faltered. Her mother's poised perfection cracked into raw panic. Her father's hand twitched, but the control he once wielded over the house had slipped like water through fingers. For once, no one could ignore her. The Duke's gaze found hers. But now, it was softer, steady, unwavering, a recognition she had waited a lifetime for. He didn't offer pity. He didn't offer power. He offered truth. You have always been remarkable, he said, not because they see you, but because you never let them define you. A quiet, explosive shift swept through her. Lila felt it, the invisible chains of her life snapping, replaced by a fragile, fierce clarity. The locket throbbed against her chest, and she realized its final secret. The words engraved inside, even in shadow you shine, were never a promise from her mother. They were her own. She had carried her own light all along. Justice came in subtle ways. Her family could no longer pretend. Clarice faltered in her bows. Elise's rehearsed laughter dissolved into embarrassed silence. Her mother's sharp whispers ended, replaced with strained attempts at apology. Lila didn't need vengeance. She needed recognition, and she had earned it. From the shadows near the doorway, the faintest movement caught her eye. The figure she had glimpsed before, the silent watcher, stepped forward. Not a threat, not an enemy, but a messenger, a reminder that the world outside the gilded walls was vast, full of choices and unknown challenges. Lila smiled, finally ready to step into it. She took the Duke's hand. Together they walked into the sunlight spilling across the balcony. The city lay before them, bright, alive, and full of possibilities. Lila no longer carried the weight of invisibility, nor the scars of neglect. She had chosen herself, and in doing so, had rewritten her story. And as the first rays touched her face, glinting off the locket one last time, she realized something simple, undeniable, unforgettable. The world could try to ignore her, to control her, to bury her in shadows, but she had learned to shine anyway. The hall remained silent behind them, the family left to reckon with the truth. But Lila didn't look back. She had stepped out of the shadows, and this time she would never be unseen again.